From Neville Goddard, we learned that we absolutely have full access to the God power with one condition, and that is, do we believe? But oftentimes our beliefs are often clouded by cognitive distortions. These distortions skew our understanding of ourselves and the world, leading us away from the truth and into endless unproductive spirals. Cognitive distortions are very common, especially when we look at social media and politics. They are used to manipulate our thoughts and keep us stuck in our current reality. To truly harness our power to shape our lives, we need to identify and break down these cognitive distortions. By doing so, we can clear our minds, understand our true potential, and create the reality we desire. A distorted thought, or cognitive distortion, is a way of thinking that exaggerates the truth and isn't based on facts. This makes you see things more negatively than they really are. In simple terms, cognitive distortions trick you into believing negative things about yourself and your world that aren't necessarily true. Our thoughts greatly influence how we feel and act, and they shape the reality we live in. When you believe these negative thoughts as if they are facts, you start to see yourself and act based on incorrect assumptions. Everyone experiences cognitive distortions occasionally. It's a normal part of being human. This happens especially when we're feeling down. However, if you constantly think negatively, it can harm your mental health. Negative thoughts can turn into reality, creating situations where bad things like catastrophes, sickness, and accidents seem to happen more often. This is because you become stuck in a negative mindset. But there's good news. You can learn to recognize cognitive distortions. Once you know when your mind is playing tricks on you, you can reframe and redirect your thoughts. This helps reduce their negative impact on your mood, behavior, and the reality you create. Cognitive distortions are biased ways of thinking that cloud our judgment and warp our perception. They often lead to negative emotions and unhealthy behaviors. Understanding these distortions is crucial because it sets the foundation for positive change and personal growth. Cognitive distortions aren't just abstract psychological ideas. They are real experiences that shape our everyday lives. These distorted thinking patterns act like lenses that alter how we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. They can turn minor setbacks into huge obstacles, fleeting thoughts into fixed beliefs, and manageable situations into overwhelming crises. The impact of cognitive distortions is significant. They can hold us back, limit our potential, and trap us in a cycle of negative thinking and self-doubt. They distort our perception of reality, making us interpret situations in ways that reinforce our deepest insecurities and fears. Recognizing and addressing these distortions can help us break free from this cycle, allowing us to see things more clearly and live more positively. Why do we start thinking in ways that are not accurate? Sometimes, these distorted thoughts come from things that happened in our past, from times we were hurt, or from things we learned. They're ways our mind tries to handle stress and not knowing what will happen. These thoughts might make us feel better for a little while or like we have control, but in the end they usually make things worse. The good news is we can change these ways of thinking. So I want to explain 14 common cognitive distortions. There are more than just these 14, but these are the main thought patterns that strengthen your negative beliefs and keep you stuck in a cycle of negative thinking and emotional stress. The first that I see all the time and I'm very guilty of is filtering. Filtering is a type of thinking error where we only focus on the negative parts of a situation, ignoring anything positive. It's like wearing glasses that only let you see the bad things, making it hard to notice the good stuff. For example, if you get mostly positive feedback at work but also one small piece of constructive criticism, you might only focus on the criticism and ignore all the praise. This happens to me a lot. I experienced this earlier in my career. During a performance review, my manager praised my hard work repeatedly, highlighting many things they appreciated about my efforts. However, they also gave me one minor suggestion for improvement. After that meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about that single suggestion and felt miserable, despite all the positive feedback. I've seen filtering happen in relationships and nearly every part of life. It's a distorted way of thinking where someone pays attention only to the negatives. Filtering can show up in several ways. One way is selective attention, where a person focuses only on the negative details and ignores the positives. Another example is having a negative bias, where someone sees situations, people, or themselves through a pessimistic lens, often feeling sad, anxious, or with low self-esteem. This negative bias can strengthen existing negative beliefs and attitudes, creating a vicious cycle of distorted thinking and negative emotions. Have you ever been around people who constantly complain or point out problems? Even if their complaints are valid, it's all they do. They see every politician as corrupt, every salesperson as manipulative, and they always expect the worst from everyone they meet. I see this kind of filtering all the time. When someone consistently focuses on the negative, it can affect their behavior significantly. They might be less likely to take risks or pursue opportunities because they're afraid of failure or disappointment. They might also engage in avoidance behaviors, steering clear of situations they think will end badly. This constant focus on negativity can make life feel much harder and more distressing than it needs to be. The second cognitive distortion is polarization. Polarized thinking is when you see things as all good or all bad, with no in-between. It's like thinking in black and white without recognizing the shades of grey that are usually present in life. For example, you might think your co-worker was great until she ate your sandwich, and now you can't stand her. Or, if you usually get A's but get a B on one test, you might think you failed as a student. This kind of all-or-nothing thinking sets unrealistic standards for yourself and others, which can harm your relationships and motivation. It sets you up to fail. Imagine you've decided to eat healthy foods, but one day you don't have time to prepare a meal and end up eating a bacon burger. With polarized thinking, you might immediately feel like you've ruined your healthy eating plan and decide to give up entirely because you think it's all or nothing. Polarized thinking means you categorize everything in extreme terms, missing the complexity of people and situations. You might view news events in extremes, thinking the world is either ending or everything is perfect. This type of thinking leaves no room for the middle ground, which is where most situations actually fall. It can lead to setting impossibly high standards for yourself and seeing yourself as a failure when you can't meet them. This can harm your self-image and make you feel inadequate. Politicians often use polarized language to make people think in extremes, wanting you to see issues in black and white terms. This rigid way of thinking makes it hard to solve problems, adapt to change, and understand the complexities of life. When someone with polarized thinking is told they should try to be less rigid, they might agree but still think everyone else is wrong and they are always right. This mindset can damage relationships because it leads to unrealistic expectations and misunderstandings. If you see others as entirely good or bad, it can be hard to appreciate the good in people when they make mistakes. To overcome polarized thinking, you can practice cognitive restructuring. This means learning to recognize and challenge your extreme thoughts. Try to see situations and people on a spectrum instead of as absolutes. For example, rather than viewing a work project as a total success or failure, look at what went well and what could be improved. Embracing ambiguity and uncertainty is also important. Life isn't usually black and white, and accepting the grey areas can make you more flexible and resilient. Using more nuanced language helps too. Instead of saying always or never, try sometimes or partially. This shift in language reflects a more balanced view of the world. Polarized thinking can lead to intense emotional swings, seeing situations as either extremely positive or negative. By challenging this type of thinking, you can achieve a more stable and balanced emotional state. Overcoming polarized thinking is crucial for building resilience. Life has ups and downs, and seeing setbacks as temporary and specific, rather than as complete failures, helps you persevere and feel more in control. The third major cognitive distortion is overgeneralization. When you overgeneralize, you take one bad event and assume it will always happen. This means you use words like always, never, everything and nothing a lot. For example, if one Korean person does something bad, you might think, all Koreans people are bad. This kind of thinking shows up in less obvious ways too. Imagine you speak up at a team meeting, but your ideas aren't used. You might leave thinking, I ruined my chances for a promotion. I never say the right thing. You start believing that you always mess up, even though it was just one meeting. Overgeneralization is important to understand because it makes you see patterns of failure and defeat where there are none. It affects how you see yourself, others, and the world. For instance, if you're late for work and hit a red light, you might think, nothing ever goes my way, and start believing that nothing will ever go your way. People often make big, sweeping conclusions based on one event or a small piece of evidence. This distorted thinking can damage your self-image and self-esteem. If you make a mistake and think it means you're always a failure, you'll develop a harsh view of yourself. This creates a negative feedback loop. The more you overgeneralize, the worse you feel, and the worse you feel, the more you overgeneralize. Overgeneralization can happen in different parts of your life. For example, if you have one bad experience at a party, you might think you're always awkward in social situations. This can stop you from trying new things or meeting new people. In relationships, overgeneralization can cause misunderstandings and conflicts. If a friend does something inconsiderate once, you might think they're always thoughtless, which can strain your friendship. Or if your partner makes one mistake, you might think they'll always make that mistake, which could lead to a breakup even if you're a great match for each other. You turn one event into a bigger issue than it really is. To challenge overgeneralization, you need to look for evidence that disproves these sweeping conclusions. Think about times when things went well or when people behaved differently. This helps you see the full picture and not just the negative parts. Overgeneralization is similar to catastrophic thinking, where you always expect the worst possible outcome. Learning to recognize and challenge overgeneralized thoughts can help you see things more realistically and improve your relationships, self-esteem, and overall outlook on life. The fourth cognitive distortion I see all the time is jumping to conclusions. When you jump to conclusions, you assume something negative without any evidence and then react as if it were true. For example, if your partner comes home looking serious, you might think they're mad at you without asking how they are. Because of this assumption, you keep your distance. But in reality, your partner just had a bad day at work. This habit of jumping to conclusions is also known as mind reading. It usually stems from your own worries and may have nothing to do with what the other person is actually thinking. Imagine you're at a party and you see a friend across the room. You wave, but they don't wave back. You immediately think, they must be mad at me. You spend the rest of the party feeling anxious and avoiding them. In reality, they simply didn't see you because they were distracted. By jumping to the conclusion that they're upset with you, you let your assumption affect your behavior and feelings. Or consider a situation at work. Your manager walks by without saying hello and you instantly think, I must have done something wrong. You spend the whole day worried about your job, but later you find out your manager was preoccupied with an urgent project and wasn't even thinking about you. Your assumption caused you unnecessary stress. Jumping to conclusions often results from our own insecurities and fears. It's important to recognize when you're doing this and question your assumptions. Ask yourself if you have any real evidence for your thoughts, or if you might be misinterpreting the situation. To stop jumping to conclusions, try to gather more information before reacting. Instead of assuming your partner is mad at you, ask them how their day was. Instead of thinking your friend finds you boring, consider that they might just be having a tough day. By seeking clarity, you can avoid misunderstandings and improve your relationships. Jumping to conclusions means reacting to assumptions rather than facts. This can lead to unnecessary stress and strained relationships. By learning to question your assumptions and seek more information, you can better understand situations and people, reducing the negative impact of this thinking habit. The fifth common cognitive distortion is fortune-telling, which means predicting a negative outcome for a future event without any real evidence. This often leads to worry and anxiety. For instance, before a test, you might think, "I'm going to fail," even if you're well prepared. Or, if you're waiting for medical test results, you might assume they're going to be bad and that something is seriously wrong, causing you to worry and feel sick. This type of thinking can create major anxiety, hold you back from taking risks, and prevent you from trying new things. It can also create a self-fulfilling prophecy, where expecting something bad to happen actually makes it more likely to occur because of how you react. To avoid jumping to conclusions, ask yourself, what is the evidence for and against my thought? This can help you see the situation more clearly. Consider other possible explanations or viewpoints. For example, if you think your friend is ignoring your text because they're mad at you, consider that they might just be busy or haven't seen the message yet. Ask yourself, how likely is it that what I'm worried about will actually happen, and has it happened before? This can help you keep things in perspective. Imagine you have a big presentation at work next week. You start thinking, "I'm going to mess it up," even though you've prepared thoroughly. This thought makes you so anxious that you can't focus on your practice. And as a result, your presentation isn't as good as it could have been. Your prediction of failure becomes more likely because of your anxiety and lack of focus. Or think about someone who has an upcoming job interview. They might think, "I won't get the job because I'm not good enough," despite having the necessary qualifications and experience. This negative thought can cause them to perform poorly in the interview due to nervousness, making it less likely that they'll get the job. To combat this kind of thinking, remind yourself of times when things have gone well. For example, if you think, "I always mess up presentations," recall past presentations that went smoothly. Challenge the idea that you always fail by looking at the evidence. Consider talking to a friend who can remind you of your strengths and successes. Fortune-telling involves predicting negative outcomes without evidence, leading to unnecessary anxiety and self-fulfilling prophecies. By questioning these thoughts and considering other possibilities, you can reduce anxiety and improve your overall well-being. Focusing on the present and seeking support from others can help you develop a more balanced and rational mindset, leading to healthier relationships and a happier life. The sixth common cognitive distortion is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is a type of thinking where you always expect the worst possible outcome, no matter how unlikely it is. This often involves what-if questions like, "What if he didn't call because he got into an accident?" Or, "What if she hasn't arrived because she doesn't want to spend time with me?" This kind of thinking leads to a lot of worry and anxiety. For example, my mother used to do this all the time. She'd warn me about all sorts of dangers, like saying, "Be careful driving home. There's a lot of black ice out there." Even when I checked the weather reports and found no mention of black ice, I still ended up encountering it, likely because her constant warnings made me more anxious and aware of it. Catastrophizing can be very manipulative. People might use it to scare you and then offer a solution to the exaggerated problem. For example, someone might say, "The economy is going to crash, but I have a way to protect your money," to get you to buy their product. This kind of thinking shows up in everyday situations too. Someone might feel a mild pain in their chest and immediately think, "I'm having a heart attack," instead of considering less serious possibilities. Or an employee who makes a minor mistake might think, "I'm going to get fired," without any evidence to support that fear. Catastrophizing can cause intense anxiety and stop people from taking action because they're so afraid of the worst-case scenario. There are two main types: predictive catastrophizing, where you predict a disaster, and magnification catastrophizing, where you blow an event out of proportion. For example, after a social gathering, you might focus on a small, awkward moment and think, "Everyone noticed, and now they all think I'm weird." Or a student might get a lower grade than expected and think, "I'm going to fail the course and ruin my entire academic career." To deal with catastrophic thoughts, ask yourself, what evidence do I have for and against this thought? Think about the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and the most likely outcome to get a balanced view. Practice staying in the present moment and use grounding techniques. Create and use coping statements like, I can handle this, or I've been through tough times before. If catastrophizing leads to avoidance, try facing your fears gradually. If this type of thinking is seriously affecting your life, consider seeking help from a therapist. Meditation and mindfulness can also be helpful. Addressing catastrophizing is crucial because it can lead to depression, sadness, and other mental health issues. The seventh cognitive distortion is personalization. Personalization is when you think you're responsible for events that are actually out of your control. This way of thinking can make you feel guilty or blame yourself without considering other factors. For example, if your child gets hurt at a party, you might blame yourself for letting them go, even though the accident wasn't your fault. It's like taking everything personally, even when it's not about you. This often happens because of our ego. For instance, if someone criticizes a parenting style in general, you might feel they are attacking your way of parenting specifically. Or if a friend is in a bad mood, you might think, it must be because of something I did or said, even though their mood has nothing to do with you. Personalization can also make you compare yourself to others and feel inadequate. For example, if a coworker gets praised for a project, you might think, I should have done more to help. Their success makes me look bad. Or if someone makes a general comment about improving work ethic, you might assume they're talking about you specifically, even when they're not. I've struggled with this myself. It's easy to think the world revolves around us, like we're the main character in a play. While we are important, not everything that happens is about us. This idea might seem to conflict with the belief that we create our own reality and are responsible for everything in it. I'm not saying to avoid responsibility, but to recognize that not every comment or event is directed at you. To overcome personalization, focus on what you can control. Understand that just because you can influence a situation, it doesn't mean you're fully responsible for it. Acknowledge other factors that contribute to a situation instead of blaming yourself. Be kind to yourself and remember that making mistakes or facing challenges doesn't define your worth. Use more balanced language. Instead of saying, I ruined everything, try saying, things didn't go as planned, and there were several factors involved. If you're unsure whether you're personalizing something, ask a trusted friend or family member for feedback. Often, you might not even realize you're doing it. The eighth distortion is the fallacy of fairness. Many of us tend to view the world through a lens of fairness, constantly evaluating behaviors and situations to determine if they are fair. When others don't share our sense of fairness, it can make us feel upset and resentful. Essentially, you believe you know what is fair and what isn't, and you get frustrated when others disagree with you. This mindset can lead to conflicts with people and in various situations because you expect everything to be fair based on your own standards. However, fairness is rarely clear-cut and can often be biased towards our own interests. For instance, you might expect your partner to give you a foot massage because you spent all afternoon preparing dinner for them. You think it's fair, but your partner comes home exhausted and just wants to take a bath. They believe it's fair for them to take some time to relax so they can fully enjoy the dinner you made and pay attention to you later without being distracted and tired. It's a mistake to think that everyone should be treated exactly the same in all situations, without considering individual needs or circumstances. For example, you might say, I work just as hard as my co-worker, so it's only fair that we get the same recognition and rewards. But life doesn't always work that way. Holding on to anger or resentment when things don't seem fair can backfire. You might think, I always help my friends when they need it, but they weren't there for me when I needed help. It's just not fair. Creating strict internal rules about how people should behave and getting upset when these rules aren't followed can be detrimental. I've seen people, especially at the start of a relationship, get extremely angry about something their partner does or says. They have these unwritten rules about fairness and think, they're not respecting me. What they did and said isn't right. The other person might not even be aware of these internal rules, leading to misunderstandings and conflicts that can ruin a good relationship. This often stems from this cognitive distortion about the fallacy of fairness. So ask yourself if your idea of fairness is realistic and consider if being more flexible would be beneficial. Try to see situations from others' perspectives and practice empathy by considering their needs and circumstances. Recognize that life is inherently unfair at times and focus on responding constructively instead of dwelling on perceived injustices. Understand your own limits and communicate them clearly instead of expecting others to automatically know what is fair. Aim for compromise and mutual understanding rather than rigid rules of fairness. Shift your focus from what seems unfair to what you are grateful for in life. Holding on to feelings of resentment hurts you more than anyone else. Practice letting go and moving forward. The 9th common cognitive distortion is blaming. I see this often. People tend to blame others, events, or circumstances for their problems. This way of thinking significantly distorts reality and affects you in a major way. Blaming means holding others responsible for how you feel. For example, when you say, "You made me feel bad," you're engaging in this cognitive distortion. Even when someone does something hurtful, you still have control over how you react emotionally in most situations. The distortion comes from believing that others have more power over your life than you do. For instance, if your partner makes a comment about your new dress and you feel upset for the rest of the day, you might think, "You made me feel bad about myself by saying that." In reality, you are the one in control of your feelings. Are you aware of this? Everything that happens in your life is within your sphere of influence. There's no need to blame anyone else. This distortion leads to a lack of accountability, strains relationships, and hinders personal growth. Placing blame on others for your own feelings, actions, or misfortunes is wrong. I've heard people say things like, "It's my team's fault I didn't finish the project on time. They didn't support me enough, so it's their fault." On the other hand, attributing all the blame to yourself, even when external factors played a significant role, is also wrong. It's important to acknowledge and take responsibility for your own actions and their impact on situations. Develop empathy by trying to understand situations from others' perspectives and considering external factors that may have influenced their actions. Use I statements to express your emotions without placing blame. Instead of saying, "You made me feel," try saying, "I feel." This way you take ownership of your feelings and reduce the tendency to blame others. Rather than dwelling on blame, focus on finding a solution and moving forward. Actively challenge and reframe your thoughts that attribute blame to others without evidence. For instance, instead of thinking, "It's their fault I'm unhappy," consider what steps you can take to improve your own situation. Remember, blaming others takes away your power and control over your own life. By taking responsibility for your feelings and actions, you can foster healthier relationships and personal growth. Practice empathy, use I statements, and focus on solutions rather than blame. This shift in perspective will help you move forward constructively and positively. The 10th common cognitive distortion is should. These are one of the most harmful types of cognitive distortions. Should statements are rigid, subjective rules you set for yourself and others, often without considering the specifics of a situation. You tell yourself that things must be a certain way, with no exceptions. For example, you might think that people should always be on time, or that someone who is independent should never ask for help. When it comes to yourself, you might believe you should always make your bed or should always make people laugh. You constantly tell yourself you should be better. When these things don't happen, you feel guilty, disappointed, let down, or frustrated. You may think you're trying to motivate yourself with statements like, "I should go to the gym every day." However, when circumstances change and you can't do what you should, you become angry and upset. For example, if you get out of work late and can't get to the gym, you feel bad because you think you should have gone. Imposing strict rules on yourself or others about how people should behave or how events should happen is problematic. This way of thinking can lead to feelings of frustration, resentment, guilt, and disappointment when reality doesn't match these strict expectations. Shoulds can apply to your own behavior, the behavior of others, or the state of the world in general. Creating unrealistic standards for yourself is a self-imposed should that you should avoid. For instance, if you say, "I should always get everything right. If I make a mistake, it means I'm a failure." You're setting yourself up for disappointment. Similarly, imposing shoulds on others can lead to conflict. You might expect others to behave according to your values or standards, thinking things like, "He should know how I feel without me having to say anything," or, "If he cared about me, he would just understand." The world is full of imposed shoulds, like believing that life should always be fair or bad things shouldn't happen to good people. Expecting your partner to always know what you need without communicating can lead to disappointment and conflict. If you think, "You should have done this," and then get angry because they didn't do what you expected, you are falling into this distortion. Have you recently gotten angry with your partner because they didn't do something you thought they should? Have you evaluated your shoulds? Maybe you believe you should be acknowledged and praised at work and you feel undervalued when this doesn't happen. You might sit and dwell on it, which can lead to feelings of depression. This distortion can be very damaging. Holding yourself to unrealistically high standards can lead to feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem when you don't meet your own shoulds. The pressure of these shoulds can contribute to anxiety, stress, and depression as they become rules you impose on your reality. So when you notice yourself using should statements, challenge them. Ask yourself if they are realistic and fair, and what evidence supports or contradicts them. Replace should with prefer or would like. Instead of saying "I should," say "I would prefer if I." This language is less rigid and allows for more flexibility. Be compassionate towards others and yourself. Understand that everyone has limitations and that it's okay to fall short of ideal standards. Make your expectations more realistic and attainable. Adjust your expectations by focusing on what actually happened and what can be learned from it, rather than what should have happened. Focus on the positive and practice being in the moment, accepting things as they are. If the burden of shoulds is significantly impacting your well-being, constantly saying, "These people should be doing this," or "This should be happening," or "This person should have done that," consider evaluating these thoughts and seeking help. Talk to a coach or someone you trust. Become aware of your should statements and actively challenge them. This shift in perspective can help you live a more balanced and fulfilling life. The 11th common cognitive distortion is emotional reasoning. We all fall into this trap sometimes. Emotional reasoning happens when people interpret their emotions as facts. They assume that if they feel a certain way, it must be true. This way of thinking can lead to misunderstandings and reinforce negative beliefs about yourself, others, and the world. Emotional reasoning makes you believe that your feelings reflect reality. For example, you might think, "I feel inadequate in this situation, so I must not belong anywhere." Or if you wake up feeling anxious, you might believe something bad will happen that day just because of your anxiety. You might also judge a situation based on your emotional reaction. If someone says something that makes you angry, you might quickly conclude, "That person is treating me poorly." Have you ever experienced this distortion? Believing that your feelings reflect the true nature of a situation can be misleading. While it's important to listen to your feelings, relying on them 100% can cause you to miss other crucial information needed to make decisions. Emotional reasoning can create a cycle where negative emotions lead to negative thoughts, which then intensify the negative emotions. For example, if you feel anxious about a social event and think, "I'm going to embarrass myself," your anxiety increases. This distortion often reinforces a negative self-image and contributes to low self-esteem. You might feel like a failure and think, "I'm useless and can't do anything right." Or during a moment of conflict, You might feel unloved and conclude that your partner does not care about you at all, which can strain your relationship. When you notice yourself engaging in emotional reasoning, challenge the thought. Ask yourself if there is evidence to support or contradict your thought. Learn to observe your emotions as a neutral observer without immediately reacting to them. Understand that emotions are temporary and do not define you or your reality. Often emotions are tied to deep subconscious beliefs that are not accurate. For example, you might feel anxious or fearful about something for no clear reason because of these hidden beliefs. You might think, "I'm very anxious about this, so something must be terribly wrong," but this isn't necessarily true. To counteract emotional reasoning, try using balanced thinking and look at situations from multiple perspectives, rather than relying solely on your emotional response. Learn to identify and express your emotions accurately and develop emotional literacy. Using positive affirmations can help counteract negative thoughts that arise from emotional reasoning. This approach can help you deprogram false beliefs that create these negative emotions. Remember, while emotions are important, they are not always accurate reflections of reality. By challenging emotional reasoning, you can develop a more balanced and realistic view of situations and improve your overall well-being. The 12th common cognitive distortion is the fallacy of change. This distortion makes you expect other people to change their behavior to meet your needs or expectations, especially if you pressure them enough. For example, you might want your partner to spend all their time with you, even though you know they are very social and enjoy spending time with their friends. Each time they go out, you express your disapproval, hoping that eventually they will change and stay home with you all the time. You believe you can change someone based on what you say and do. Thinking that your happiness or life circumstances depend on others changing their actions or beliefs is a mistake. For instance, you might think, "If only my spouse were more attentive, then I would be happy," or place unrealistic expectations on others to change their fundamental characteristics or behavior. Have you ever thought, "My friend should know that I need support right now and should be reaching out to me," and then felt angry when they didn't? They may not even be aware of your needs. Trying to coerce or manipulate others into changing their behavior to fit your desires is also problematic. You might believe, "If I act unhappy, maybe my partner will realize they need to spend more time with me." So you act unhappy all the time, but instead of changing, your partner gets tired of it and may leave you. It's important to focus on what you can control: your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You can't control others. Understand and accept that people have their own values, personalities, and behaviors that may not always match your preferences. Set realistic expectations and learn to accept others as they are, rather than how you wish them to be. Instead of expecting others to know and meet your needs, communicate your needs clearly and directly. Concentrate on changes you can make in your own behavior and reactions to better navigate relationships and situations. Focus on self-change. Try to understand others' perspectives and why they behave the way they do, instead of trying to control them. If the fallacy of change is significantly impacting your relationships and well-being, consider seeking support from a counselor or coach. Remember, trying to change others to make yourself happy is not effective and can harm your relationships. By focusing on your own actions and reactions, you can create healthier and more fulfilling relationships. The 13th common cognitive distortion is global labeling. This means taking one thing about someone and making it their entire identity. It's when you judge and define yourself or others based on just one event. These labels are usually negative and extreme. For example, if you see your new teammate putting on makeup before a meeting, you might call them shallow, or if they don't turn in a report on time, you label them as useless. This is an extreme form of overgeneralization, where you judge someone's entire character based on a single action, without considering the context. This can make you see yourself and others in ways that aren't accurate. Labeling others can affect how you interact with them, and add tension to your relationships. When you assign labels to yourself, it can harm your self-esteem, making you feel insecure and anxious. Overgeneralization, like we discussed before, is wrong because it makes broad conclusions based on limited evidence. When you label someone, it's usually negative and focused on their perceived faults. For example, if someone acts selfishly in one situation, you might label them as selfish in general. Applying global labels to yourself, especially in a critical way, can be very damaging. Saying I am stupid is an example of powerful I am messages that affect your self-view. Global labeling leads to stereotyping and unfair judgments. If you see a driver make a mistake and think, all young drivers are reckless, you're using this distortion. Phrases like all, every, one of those, and they're all alike indicate global labeling. When you notice yourself using a global label, challenge it. Ask if it's based on enough evidence and if there are counterexamples. Use specific language instead of global labels. Describe specific behaviors. Instead of saying, I'm a failure, say, I made a mistake this time. Be kind to yourself and others. Remember that everyone makes mistakes, and one incident doesn't define a person. Try to see the complexity in situations and people, rather than reducing them to a single label. Make an effort to notice and appreciate positive qualities in yourself and others. This will help you rely less on global labeling and improve your relationships and self-esteem. The 14th common cognitive distortion is always being right. I've struggled with this myself, just like I've experienced all these distortions. Recognizing and overcoming them has helped me see the world more clearly. No matter how smart you are or how much you've learned, you are not always right. It's crucial to be able to say, I am wrong, and admit that you don't know everything. If you constantly try to prove your beliefs and opinions are correct while dismissing others' perspectives, it can lead to serious problems. Holding on to your beliefs, despite evidence or viewpoints that contradict them, is harmful. People often seek out information that supports their views and ignore anything that doesn't. Once they've expressed their beliefs, they feel they can't change their mind because they don't want to appear wrong. I see this all the time. Insisting that your way is the only right way, regardless of other solutions, is a mistake. Reacting defensively when your opinions or actions are challenged and seeing it as a personal attack is a distortion. Believing you're always right makes it hard to empathize with others and understand their perspectives. Ignoring your partner's feelings during an argument because you think they're wrong will only lead to more conflict. Do you feel a constant need for others to affirm that your views are correct? Why do you feel this way? In relationships and work environments, this attitude can be damaging. For your mental health and self-awareness, you must practice humility. Accept that you don't have all the answers and that it's okay to be wrong. Make an effort to understand and validate others' perspectives, even if you don't agree with them. Embrace your mistakes and see them as opportunities for learning and growth, not as threats to your self-worth. Be willing to change your mind and say, I was wrong. Recognize that not every situation requires you to prove you are right. Sometimes it's better to let go and move on. In arguments, trying to win will usually result in both parties losing. I recommend practicing active listening. Focus on truly hearing others without planning your response while they're speaking. Do you find yourself thinking of how you're going to reply instead of listening? Often this means you miss what they're actually saying. By practicing humility and active listening and being open to other perspectives, you can improve your relationships and personal growth. Recognize that being wrong sometimes is part of being human and use it as a chance to learn and connect with others. If you actively seek feedback on your behavior, it can be very helpful. Be open to hearing that you might be wrong. Accepting this information can help you grow and improve your life. I recommend regularly reflecting on how you interact with others and thinking about how insisting on being right might be hurting your relationships and well-being. Cognitive distortions are common, and it's important to recognize them. I've provided solutions for each of the 14 cognitive distortions we've discussed, and we've emphasized how important it is to be mindful and aware. When you ask for feedback, listen carefully to what others say about your actions and behavior. Being open to criticism can help you see things from different perspectives and make positive changes. Reflect on your interactions and ask yourself if insisting on being right is causing problems. This self-reflection can help you understand how your behavior affects others and find ways to improve your relationships. Cognitive distortions, like the need to always be right, are common. They can distort your perception of reality and harm your relationships and mental health. By being mindful of these distortions and working to correct them, you can improve your understanding of yourself and others. Remember the importance of mindfulness and awareness in recognizing and overcoming these distortions. Paying attention to your thoughts and behaviors helps you spot when you're falling into these patterns. Practicing mindfulness can help you stay present and make more thoughtful decisions. In closing, actively seek feedback. Be open to hearing you might be wrong, and reflect on how your need to be right affects your relationships. Recognize and address cognitive distortions, and use mindfulness and awareness to improve your understanding and interactions with others. This approach will help you grow and achieve greater well-being. You can also keep a thought journal where you write down your thoughts, especially the negative ones. This will help you identify if a cognitive distortion is happening. Over time, as you review your journal, you'll start to notice patterns and distortions in your thinking. Ask yourself questions like, what evidence do I have for and against this thought? Or, is there another way to look at this situation? Replace distorted thoughts with more balanced and rational ones. Check if your thoughts and beliefs match the facts and reality. Think about how others might view the situation to get a more balanced perspective. Try actions that test your distorted thoughts. For example, if you think you will fail at something, give it a try and see what happens. Use the results to adjust your thoughts and beliefs. Here's a step-by-step guide to help you with this process. 1. Keep a thought journal. Write down your thoughts regularly, especially when you feel upset or negative. Note the situation that triggered the thought and how it made you feel. 2. Identify cognitive distortions. Look for patterns in your thoughts that indicate distortions. Examples include overgeneralizing, catastrophizing, or thinking you must always be right. 3. Ask questions. Challenge your thoughts by asking questions like, what is the evidence for and against this thought? Or, is there another way to look at this situation? This helps you see if your thoughts are based on facts or distortions. 4. Replace distorted thoughts. Once you identify a distorted thought, replace it with a more balanced and rational one. For example, instead of thinking, I will fail, you can think, I will do my best, and if I don't succeed, I can learn from it. 5. Check for accuracy. Evaluate your thoughts by comparing them with the facts and reality. Make sure your beliefs are based on evidence, not just feelings. 6. Consider other perspectives. Think about how someone else might view the situation. This can help you see things more objectively and reduce distortions. 7. Test your thoughts. Take actions to test your beliefs. If you think you will fail, try the task and see what happens. Use the results to adjust your thoughts and beliefs. If you succeed, it shows your initial thought was a distortion. By following these steps, you can better understand your thinking patterns and work towards more balanced and rational thoughts. This practice can improve your mental well-being and help you handle situations more effectively. Use positive affirmations. Instead of saying negative things to yourself, say positive ones that remind you of your strengths and beliefs. This can help you feel better about yourself. Learn how to handle stress and tough situations. Practice solving problems. Find ways to relax when you feel stressed, and train yourself to bounce back from difficult times. Remember, facing challenges can help you grow and learn new things. Believe in growth. Think of challenges as chances to get better, rather than things to be afraid of. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Talk to someone you trust, like a friend or family member, if you're having a tough time. Try to stay positive and grateful. Focus on the good things in your life, even when things are tough. Keep learning. Stay curious and open-minded. Read books, take classes, and listen to others, even if they disagree with you. You might learn something new that changes your mind. There are more cognitive distortions out there, and we've only talked about 14 of them. These distortions are really important because they affect how you see the world. If you can understand and get rid of these distortions, you can shape your reality the way you want. You won't let these wrong ideas steer you away from what you really want for your future. So, by tackling these distortions, you gain the power to create the life you want. Thank you for listening.